Thank you very much. As Ashley said, we're gonna go ahead and take questions in the questions panel. You'll see that on the webinar panel there. Wanted to give you guys just a first view of where you can access your Autodesk Fusion 360. You can actually get that from the desktop app, and if it's not installed, you'll see an install tool there. Also from your Autodesk account, if you've got access to download software. And the download for Fusion is really quite quick. It's not as intensive as some of the others that we get into. Today we're going to talk about some of the fundamentals of Autodesk Fusion 360. What is this tool and what can it do? And then we'll, towards the end, we'll get into a little live demonstration and just show you a few things about creating models and creating drawings. Obviously, Autodesk Fusion 360 is a comprehensive design tool. It includes full modeling capabilities, simulation capabilities, documentation capabilities, and many, many more tools. It has the ability to do feature-based modeling, direct manipulation modeling, the managing assemblies within the interface is very easy, as well as design documentation. They're going to be familiar setups, and of course maintaining complete associativity between all of the different documents. Autodesk Fusion has built-in data management, and that's really at the center of the development process. You can gain more control by leveraging and managing user permissions. There's version control within the software. It's not a separate data management tool. And there's also cloud storage, so you can access your data from anywhere as long as you've got an internet connection. There are administrative tools where you can assign permissions and grant rights. You can manage your users, either internal or external, as you're going through the development process. So if you need to add people in or remove people from your different projects, you can do so. There is a multitude of export tools where you can save out step files, DWG files, DXFs, OBJ or STL mesh files, and many more. And we'll see that within the tool itself, we have version control. We can go back and look at that design history in a couple of different ways. As we mentioned, it's got cloud storage, so your files are out on the cloud. Safe access and specific assigned access. Only the users that are assigned the rights to view a given project can get in and see those items. With AnyCAD, we eliminate the need for transition, and we can use models and data from pretty much any design tool. Doesn't have to just be Autodesk tools. We can bring those in, maintain the data relationship with those original tools, and obviously any changes are updated on the go. And then once again, just being able to control who's part of the team and who has the ability to work with that data and who we can collaborate with. The basics of Autodesk Fusion 360's interface is a number of workspaces. The initial workspace, the one that we're going to be looking at most today, is the design workspace, where we're going to create our models. We're going to do some work with creating assemblies, so on and so forth. There is a generative design workspace where we can define a particular design problem by specifying functional and manufacturing and mechanical requirements. We can get into the rendering workspace where we can create some of those photorealistic views. There's also an animation workspace where we can create those exploded views or additional animations that we can use for presentations. There is a simulation workspace where we can look at a number of different design scenarios and simulation scenarios, as well as the manufacturing workspace, all built right within the software. It's not adding extra tools. It's not necessarily installing extra tools. We have all of these different abilities right within the software. The design workspace, where we do most of our work, it has the comprehensive set of modeling tools. We can ensure our form, fit, and function of our products and various analysis methods. We've got all of the sketching tools that we're used to seeing. We can do parametric modeling, create those history-based features, as well as direct modeling, where we can edit imported geometry from non-native formats. We can make changes without worrying about specific time-based or history-based features. We've got free form modeling. We can do complex surfaces, complex faces with T-splines and edit those. We have surface modeling. We can do, again, parametric surfaces for repairing, patching, design geometry. There's a full set of sheet metal tools. We can create our sheet metals. We can create our flat patterns, 2D drawings, DXFs, all with the idea of bringing those out to the manufacturing tools, the water jets, the lasers, the plasma cutters, as well as mesh modeling. We could bring mesh models in. We could edit those. We've got the ability to bring in the STL and OBJ file types, and then certainly the full assembly design tools, and even a very intuitive method for creating assemblies. We can do that right within the interface. And then some things that have been added recently, PCB design, and that is tied into Autodesk Eagle, and we can create those boards if need be. We have the generative design workspace, where we can take a look at manufacturing ready outcomes that meet our specific design specifications. Whether it's manufacturing methods and constraints. There's also some intuitive cloud generated design outcomes that we're allowed to access, as well as being able to edit the results. We can do a cloud solve, so we're not using up our time and our system for those heavy tasks, as well as some costing tools. On the documentation side, we certainly have the ability to do 2D manufacturing drawings. As we mentioned, we can do those photorealistic renderings and even some animation with our assemblies. We can pull those things in. The simulation workspace is a really impressive set of tools. Allows us to ensure that our designs will survive real world conditions, easy for me to say. Simulate our products digitally. We can reduce cost prototyping by using fully validated solvers. All of this can be done in the cloud using credits, or there's methods for getting unlimited access. We can look at 8 different value criteria if we so desire, including the nonlinear, event simulation, and many more. We can cut dissolve time and explore different design changes within the simulation workspace. Compare our results. We have the ability to look at 4 different iterations visually on screen while we're going through our different designs. Obviously, there's static stress. We can determine displacement, stresses, and other effects resulting from static loads, modal frequency, any destructive vibration. There's thermal and thermal stress. We can understand thermal distributions and how they interact with those physical forces. There's buckling that we can access and look at any unexpected failure modes. Nonlinear stress, we can analyze for permanent deformation, and also look at nonlinear materials. There's event simulation, where we can see, does our design survive various impacts? And kind of as we mentioned, the shape optimization for identifying unnecessary regions and making lighter weight components. In that manufacturing workspace, we have a multitude of tools for 2.5 axis, 3 axis, 4 axis, 5 axis. We can do turning. We have setup probes, mill turning. We have access for water jet, laser cutter, and plasma cutter tools, as well as a really comprehensive post-processor library that is open source, so it's fully editable. We can get into all of those needs. Today, I want to give you guys a little bit of an interview or a review of the interface, and just kind of look at some of the basic tools, just kind of an introduction to it, to what we're getting into, and this is the typical interface. As we go through this, we have that data panel that's over on the left, and that's going to show items within our given projects. It allows us to create new projects or folders, or even add in additional users as we go through, and they'll be able to see those live updates. The browser here and on screen is maybe a little bit different than what we might have seen in other tools. We have access, depending on the whether we're doing a single component or assemblies. We have access to those components to different solids. We may have access to the joints if it's an assembly, or sketches if we've got a single component. And then down below shows the history of that design. In this case, a particular assembly, showing what components and what joints, what connections these components have to one another. And then on the left side of that timeline bar, we can actually start from the very beginning and either walk through or play through the design process to see how things were put together. Obviously, we have the ribbon at the top, and in this particular, we're looking at the design workspace. This ribbon doesn't really change much. It stays pretty much as you see it there. There are pull-down menus that we'll look at here in just a little bit that have the additional tools. We have the quick access toolbar that's up on the top left there, and that allows us to kind of hide that data panel, as well as get into some of the other workspaces. Gives us save and undo, redo, those two very popular commands. At least they're popular for me anyway. Of course, we have the graphics window where we show our models, and our display controls are down at the bottom. So this gives us all of our zoom controls, as well as some canvas controls, background color and different things. We'll look at that just a little bit deeper. And the view cube, of course, that's in just about all Autodesk software. That doesn't change much. Our different tabs, if we've got multiple files open, the tab settings are across the top, where we can bring those in and switch between different designs. And then, of course, the help button in the top right corner, and the additional account settings and preferences, almost your application options. We've got some settings for that. That data panel, as we mentioned, gives you a list of all the different projects, and then as you get into a project, you can display thumbnails of that project, or you can limit it out to a list of the different items that are within that project, the different components, model files, and so on and so forth. This does allow the cloud access for collaboration, so you can invite other members inside and outside of your organization. And you have the ability to organize your files within subfolders, so on and so forth, that you can create. The browser for part components, as I mentioned, it shows our sketches and our different work planes, work axes, so on and so forth, as well as any bodies that we've created, any solid bodies. It does not show that history. That history, again, is down on the bottom in that timeline. For an assembly, we can see the different joints that we've created. Obviously, the components that are within our assemblies, those can be split out, and we've got visualization tools here that we can turn on, turn off. And then our drawing browser, just a little bit different, again, showing showing the views themselves, the components that are in a view, and you have the ability right within that browser to turn the visibility of some of those components off. Relatively intuitive process. And then just kind of to highlight the timeline itself. Once again, that shows a history of the design. We have that ability on the left-hand end to step through that design, to start from the very beginning and watch as each progressed. The assembly timeline the same way, what components are grounded, where the joints are. And this is where we would go when we need to edit a given feature or edit a joint or a specific component. We would select in the timeline here. And then, of course, the drawing timeline will show us our different sheets within a drawing. It allows us to add sheets. And then down at the right-hand end of that timeline bar, you have some settings. If we want to, we don't have to capture that history. We can say we don't want to capture the history. We don't want that included. So we can turn that off. We can add in some visualization tools there, different options for each of our components. And then if we suppress any of our features, we can actually hide those. We have that ability as well. As far as the ribbon is concerned, each of the panels has a pull down. The Create panel, you can see all the various tools there: extrude, revolve, sweep, and loft. We've got all of the primitives: box, cylinder, sphere, as well as some of the pattern tools and mirroring common tools that we're used to seeing in the Create panel there. The Modify panel, again, things like fillet and chamfer. We've got move and copy and combine and some of those common tools. And then we also, on that same ribbon bar, we have the assemble tools where we can create new components, we can build joints, we can even use as-built joints. So we'll see here in a little while that we're creating a multitude of bodies and then turning those into different components, how we can join those together. Our quick access toolbar here, just some different options for it. Obviously, there's that hide the data panel. That is just the small grid here. The new design panel, so that gives us this list here on the right where we can create a new design. We can even create those new electronic designs, those PCB layouts and whatnot, as well as creating components for an electronic library. We have access to creating a new drawing, whether that's from design or from an object that we want to open, or creating our new templates. The quick access toolbar has additional tools for save, obviously, and undo, redo. So all of those are there. Down at the bottom of the interface is that display control. So we have the common tools for orbit, look at, pan, zoom window, and fit are together. But then there's some display settings where we can control the background display. We can control the visual style, mesh display if we're bringing in a mesh model. We've got tools for controlling how the environment looks, as well as any object visibility tools, our work planes, work features, so on and so forth. And then that bar also has, that display controls bar also has tools for creating grids and snaps, and if we want to set those, as well as splitting out the viewports if we need to do that and look at multiple files or multiple iterations, as we mentioned, when we do simulations. In the top right of the interface is the account settings bar, and from here we can add or get access to additional extensions. There are additional tools for the manufacturing workspace, I believe for the simulation workspace, generative workspace. There's some additional tools in there. Next to that is the job status and update notifications. So as we're doing, if we send a job to the cloud, that gives us the status of that job, but it also will let us know if there's an update available. So it's an in-canvas notification. And the nice thing about the updates for 360 is that it's literally, hey, there's a new update, just restart your software. You don't have to download anything. You don't have to wait for it to install. It's ready, and it's just real-time update. It's pretty neat. Obviously, we've got access to the help. And then the last icon is our account sign-in, but under that is also the UI preferences, or considered as application options, where we can get to a multitude of things, different colors, material, default material specifications. We can change our units, we can set up decimal places, so on and so forth. And we can set those for different workspaces, the manufacturing workspace, simulation, and generative design workspace. We have all of that available within those preferences. So let's take a couple minutes and go through a demo here. See if we can't take a look at the software itself. I've got just kind of the blank interface. I'm looking at that design workspace and a set of practice files that we actually use for our specific training here. We can access those different workspaces right here. There's that design workspace that we're in, generative, rendering, animation, and simulation, as well as manufacturing. And then we can create our design or create our drawings from a given design or from a given animation if we so desire. We'll start with something pretty simple here. I'm just going to go ahead and start a very simple sketch. And again, we have access to picking those work planes, those origin planes. All of our specific design tools. We got line and rectangle and circle and arc. Very common tools, nothing terribly complicated. As we create designs, we certainly have that ability to not only add in our dimensional constraints, but also the geometric constraints. You can see there that it's applying that horizontal constraint. Let's go ahead and make that 3 inches, and we can set an angle there if we so desire. I'll go ahead and leave that right there. As we come up, we can add in a different dimension, or we can just begin to work with our design. We've got that ability to track from those midpoints. You know, a very common setup or a setup that we're used to seeing. Go ahead and bring that in, and then if I want to, I can come in and add dimensions. We still have that ability to use our existing dimensions if we want to. Let's see here. Let's add in another dimension, and let's see. Bring this one over, and we'll call it that divided by 2. So we can certainly do those formulas. And we even have those geometric constraints where we can tie things together if we need to. However we want to do that. And I'll do one more, horizontal and vertical. There we go. And that ties us in. And we can finish that sketch relatively easily. Working with our different features here, all of the common features that we might use. We can pull those out. We've got push-pull tools for our different features. We can add in drafts, type in different values here, whatever we need to do. Nothing terribly difficult about how the tool works. Boxes can be a little bit different than perhaps we're used to seeing. If we want to do, something like placing a hole in, we can set our dimensions. Let's do, and this one. And then if we want to set our diameter value, we can do that as well. Let's see here. that is our depth. Why don't we go all the way through here? And we can set our size if we want to. Let's do this as just a simple hole. Make that one just a little bit easier. And that gives us access to adjust the size of that hole as well. Add that in. If we want to do something something additional, you know, if I want to say I'll put a cylinder on the top of this. One of the nice things is being able to track from those endpoints. Just kind of dragging over those and adding those in. Certainly adding in a dimension. And using the drag tools, or if we so desire, type in a dimension for our height. And we're adding in additional features. We have that ability to create that join. We can create a cut. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and create a new body, and we'll select OK. Once I do that, of course, I've got access to the different bodies, and from those I can create components. Now, the nice thing about this process is I don't have to work through a associative setup where I'm tied back to another file. I'm right here in this one file, and now that this is created, I can come in here and give this its own name, and I can come back and grab the other one and very easily create a component from that. And then I can control the visibility of those. So if I want to turn one off, if I want to work with one of the specific components, just activate it. Just select the component, activate it. I can come in and add different options to that. That obviously is smart enough to read my settings here, my diameter, and give me the information that I need. If I want to see my other component, I can go ahead and do that. While I've got that bar activated, of course, the other is slightly grayed out. And if I want to activate the whole thing, again, come up to the top and just bring that in. Pretty simple process. Now, if I want, I can add outside components as well, components that are already created. First thing that I would need to do is go ahead and save this guy, and we'll put that in and save that, and then I can come through and any components that are within my project. And this isn't necessarily a project that we might see with other software. This is essentially a folder structure that allows me to place those. As I bring these other components in, I've got full motion and rotate capabilities. We can go ahead and simply bring that in. Now, when it comes to the different joints, you know, obviously I've got that one. It's not completely joined yet, and then I've got this guy here. Let me go ahead and undo those moves just a little bit, and let's use this assemble tool. The first thing I'm going to do is as built joints and select my components. And I can change that joint type. Let's go ahead and set that one as rigid. So those are locked in. If I want to, I can come in and let's go ahead and select that given object there and ground it. So now none of this can move. And then we'll take, and we still have this guy where we can come in and we can bring up our joints tool. And just because I did a little bit of a drag on that, it says, do I want to capture the position? In this case, no, I don't. So I'll select that. I can get to that mid plane of that bar, and using my 3D motion controller, I can even come in and get to the edge or the specific mid plane of that cylinder. So I can bring that guy in pretty quickly. Again, nothing real complicated here. If I don't like this rigid joint, I can come back and edit that guy. Say we'll come in and instead of the rigid joint, we have revolve. So I'll go ahead and set that as a revolve and let that spin around. If I decide, obviously, that I want to alter that component there, again, not a problem. I can come in, I can see that component. If I want to change that hole, because I created it at the top level document, that's going to be in the history tree here. So as we look at this, that hole is right there. So I can come into that feature and just edit that. We'll change that diameter just a little bit. Let's set that at say 1/2 inch. And that makes that just a little bit better. As far as these icons here for the different joints, I have that ability right here to come in and turn their individual visibility off, or I can do it as a group. Just turn the full set off. Pretty simple process. Nothing real earth-shattering about the design capabilities themselves. Obviously, we have access to creating all the varying work planes, as well as the inspection tools, and even inserting decals, so on and so forth, and our selection tools. We talked about our design tools down below here, and some of the different display settings. We can change our background environment if we want to. We can change, through our effects, we can bring in our different shadows, bring in our ground plane, and then obviously the work planes and different work features, we can bring those in. Our visual style, shaded with edges, so on and so forth. It is a more realistic visual style by default. So it's kind of a neat setup that way. If I were to create a drawing of this, simplest way is again, pulling from the workspaces, and we're going to do from design. And we have some options here for creating that drawing. Are we going to do the full assembly? We can set up some named views if we want to, where we've got certain objects suppressed. We can do visible only. We can select individual objects. We can come in and we're going to create a new drawing here. Are we going to create that from scratch? Or do we have a specific template saved out? And then what are our standards and our units and the size of that drawing? We can adjust that here. So we'll go ahead and start that. And it starts right away by giving me that base view tool. And I can grab this and change the scale here. I've got the ability to do shaded, hidden edges, shaded with hidden edges, however I want. Do I want to show my tangent edges? Do I want to show threaded edges, so on and so forth? So I'll go ahead and place that and simply click OK. We've got those projected views where we pick our view, and we can get our certainly get our projected views. We can get an isometric view if we so desire. Pull that out, no big deal. And again, we can come in, edit those views, and decide how we want to see those. Pretty simple process. The dimension tools are going to be real familiar. We've got edges that we can dimension. We can do certainly diameters. Oh, I grabbed the center point. Let's see here. Let's try that one again. There we go. We can bring that in. We've got some different note tools that we can do here. We've certainly got some geometry symbols that we can do, as well as moving, rotating, all of those things. And then our additional surfacing tools, feature control frames, tables, so on and so forth. We can bring those in, add in balloons. Nothing terribly earth-shattering or terribly complicated within the software itself. It's pretty comprehensive. We're not dealing with different file types. We're not bouncing around, to different ribbons and looking for different tools. They're all pretty well here in front of us. So that is pretty well as far as I wanted to take this today. I don't know, did I go too fast? Sometimes I do that. Where do we stand with our questions?
Hi, Kevin. We're doing pretty good on the questions. They've all been answered so far, so I think we're good there.
Very good. Let's see here. And let's see. We had a question that was accidentally deleted. Did that one get re-asked?
Yeah, that was my bad. It was for Joseph. And he
yeah, actually, you when you I see that Rick has asked, is there somewhere to go and set up the drawing template? So if we do simply a new design, you can come in here and you can start that from design. Once you get the new drawing started, we can go out and you can create the new template. That is something that was recently added. I don't know, what, 2-3 months ago, Tad, where they added in the ability to create templates. That was something that we hadn't had before. So let's see. Yeah, we can components versus bodies. So as we go back and we look at this, you know, when we create our extrusions, those are bodies, and much like, you know, whether it's Inventor or SolidWorks or whatever software that we're using, you can have separate solid bodies. And within Fusion, when we do that, we can turn those bodies into individual components, but we can also start a brand new design, start something, you know, real simple, and then or complicated, whatever, and save that out as an individual part itself. And it will have, you know, for instance, if we go in and we open this particular part, it has its own setup. Now, I actually brought this particular part in from Inventor, so we're not seeing that timeline view. But if you create it here in Fusion, you would see that timeline view. If not, then it's still native to Inventor. You can still make those changes, bring those back into the project if it's not part of the project already, and see the different updates. Let's see, and just to, someone has asked, is it interchangeable with Fusion? And that is absolutely true. We can bring in just about any file type, and then we can also do our save as. Let's see here, and put me on the spot here. I'm now forgetting how to save as those other file types. Let's see, I think there it is, the export. So we've got, there's the Fusion file types, DWGs, I just sat, so we can export our Fusion files out to Inventor without any issue. Obviously, drag and drop is literally what it takes to bring those in.
Kevin, it not? I think it might be important to mention that the features do not go back and forth, though.
That is absolutely true. As we can see here, the Inventor part features did not come in. I can still edit this guy if I so desire. I've got those direct modeling tools. But, you know, much like with some of the other 3D modelers that are out there, when you're crossing those file types, you do lose that feature history. Let's see. Anything else?
Can you briefly discuss bodies versus components versus assemblies?
Yeah, I think that's where we were just a little bit ago, just creating the different solid bodies and turning those into individual components. The kind of in canvas design where you're doing your sketches and your features, and creating or using that new body tool to separate those items out. And then as you desire, you can pull them into separate components. Or again, bring in, outside components. Let's see here. In 3D printing, preferred workflow and slicing software. That is something that I honestly have not gotten into very much. We have that capability. I don't know, Tad, have you worked with the 3D printing tools?
Sorry, I was muted there. Let's see if I can find that question. 3D printing preferred workflow, slicing software. It does.
Looks like the Autodesk mesh mixer.
Yeah, it's a lot like Inventor as far as being able to create file formats for 3D printing. And I'm not entirely sure I'm understanding the question completely, but Autodesk does have another piece of software that will nest different parts into a 3D printing cube so that when you print, you can have multiple files be printed on the same printer and within the same run. There's a name for that, Mesh Lab,
Mesh mixer,
or something like
mesh
that.
mixer. Yeah, it looks like it's within the 3D print tool. You've got access. It looks like to download that.
Yeah. But I'm not quite sure I understand the question about slicing, so maybe more clarification might be needed there. How do you edit a part from a browser? I think that we could answer pretty simply.
Sure. You actually, it's takes a little bit of getting used to. Obviously, you can see those parts. What we would do in this particular case, if we wanted to limit just that one part, we can activate that guy, and we can see this. Now, if we do this in this particular case, this part was created as a body. So if I come back here and if I want to do, say I want to stretch this end out, well, I'm going to use that press pull tool to stretch that end out. I would grab that and drag on that. Now, if I wanted to go back and actually edit the original sketch, because I created that essentially from the top level, I would want to go back to that top level, activate the entire setup, and now I can come back, and here is, if I'm looking at my timeline, here is that original sketch, and I can come in, edit that sketch. We'll go ahead and make this a little bit bigger here, and obviously that's going to update a lot of the different size of that that full part. So I'll go ahead and finish that sketch. We can see that updates pretty well, but yet our additional features, the hole, even the cylinder in its location, we see those are tied in. And here is that step where we created the body, or we took the body and created the component from that initial body, and then also the second one going through there. So it does depend a lot on how you create that. Certainly you can come in and create individual components and then just place them, or drag and drop, or insert You can even come in through that Assemble tab and create a new separate component. And it will allow you within that particular component to add in your given features from the software. Hole and thread notes. I don't think they've really come up with a specific hole and thread note like we see in Inventor. As we look at those, let's see here. There's our drawing. We have literally just text notes, so we can come in and bring those in, and we would literally just type in the note as we wanted to see it. We've got symbols that we can add in, but they haven't gone to that recognizing the hole and thread note specifically yet. You can see those options there. Hopefully that will be coming soon. Again, they update this, and I think I've had 2 updates in the last couple of days actually, where they make those changes. Let's see. Let's see. I don't have all the extensions in. It looks like, Tad, you kind of answered that one already. Yeah, I don't have all the extensions in, so we really don't have enough time, but we can certainly discuss that offline. It can be something that we look at.
Can the history be reordered?
Can the history be reordered? That is a very good question. So let's see here. Can I take that? Yeah, see, I can drag and drop. And obviously it's relative to what we're doing, or the history that we want to organize. So for instance, if I wanted to, I don't know if it would let me take that. Notice that I can't take that threading back before the conversion to components here. And I could, if I wanted to, take the spindle here and bring that in before I do the threading on my bar, and then obviously our joints. So there is some drag and drop ability that you can do, certainly.
Do you know where in the background the title block is to modify and make a new one, like an IPT, an Inventor?
Let's see here. Like an IDW Inventor. Let's see here. If that's where that is, we can right here, just a right click. We can edit that title block. We can create a new title block, edit the properties. So they're right inside. Joints equals constraints. Yes, Rick, that is exactly correct. What they did basically is the Inventor has the joints tool as well that are very similar to Fusion 360's joints, and that's kind of where they pulled that from. They just didn't do constraints like we're used to seeing in Inventor. You absolutely can create a new component inside of the assembly, and that's going to be under the Assemble tool. You've got new component. What are we going to, what's the standard setup? Is it a standard component? Is it sheet metal? We can do that. Is it internal? So just in this assembly, or is it external? Creates an external component and references it in the design. What's going to be the name? Do you want to do it from existing bodies, or do you want to select the parent? And we can select that parent and build it from there. Let's see here. And right from here, now we're starting with creating a sketch just like we would in Inventor. I do believe when we do that, let's just create a circle out here in space. I believe when we do that, it's its own separate entity here. And we'll finish that sketch. Do our extrude. And again, we see that as being active at this point. Let's see. Let's go ahead and go here. And then I think we have that ability to isolate that and work directly on that. We can see again at the top level, this is the sketch, this is the individual object. It's not a matter of openness. Notice that open is not in this list. This again is built into the assembly, but yet has its own sketch, its own features, its own kind of setup, and still it's an individual component itself. Let's see. As of yet, there are no tools as far as there's a little bit of scripting there, as you can see, scripts and add-ins, but certainly not as deep as iLogic is. There is our make tool here. We've got managing our materials, and the material tools are very, very similar to Inventor. Let's see here, surfacing tools. And getting to those parameters. I thought there was a way to do that. What am I missing, Tad?
I'm sorry, what was the?
Yeah, getting to the parameters within Fusion 360 interface.
I don't believe they're there. Like, you mean like Inventor and Excel and a parameter?
Yeah, that was the question. Yeah, Rick, I'm there with you, but I can tell you that Tad, our director of training, he sent me to do a Fusion 360 training here not that long ago, and it really was not that hard to get my head wrapped around once I got into it. It really wasn't. Doesn't do everything Inventor does, but then again, it does some things faster than Inventor does. Let's see here. Do the isolate, and yeah, I don't think I can edit the profile sketch, but it's not necessarily going to give me access to those parameters. I don't think they've gone there yet. I spoke too soon. Look at here. At the bottom of the modify panel, there is our list of parameters, different components, user parameters. Got access to those. Beautiful. Yep. Our original sketch, and it's really nicely split out. I apologize for saying that we don't have access to that. That's again at the bottom of the modified panel. Materials and mass properties, certainly. We can do, let's see here, where was our access to those materials? I'm sorry, it was under tools. So here is our manage materials. We call it the, and this is just my list. There's a Fusion 360 library, very familiar kind of setup. And then as we're looking at those, I mean, the setup is pretty much what we're used to seeing. And then we have obviously all the access to the physical materials and different changes. You can, much like you're used to doing, you can create your own library. As I've done, I've got the KLB material library here, and I just added in an aluminum type of material. You can create your own materials in much the same manner that you've done with Inventor or even some of the other software that's out there. Real similar tools. And Rick's question of, do we think this is a tool for people that are first getting into design versus using Inventor already? It is definitely a quick and on-the-fly tool. Some of the advantages of Fusion 360 is just file access or data access. Does it do everything that Inventor does? No, but yet it doesn't require as much as Inventor does either, or the additional, you know, if we're going to do CAM work in Inventor, well, we've got to install HSM. If we're going to do data management, we've got to have Vault. If we're going to do, so there's advantages. It really depends on the environment, the desire, and your need. There are definitely some things that will be tweaked and will be built upon in Fusion. It's not, you know, Fusion's been out for, I don't know, it's only been a year or two, hasn't it, Tad? So I think that
it hasn't been out very long.
Yeah. And
one of the nice.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, let me expand. One of the big differences whenever I discuss people Inventor versus Fusion, and I've answered this a couple times, and maybe verbally will make more sense. Keep in mind that Fusion is strictly cloud-based. So when we talk with clients and so forth, when we get into the discussion about where is your data stored, it's important to note that with Fusion, your data is stored in a cloud, and with Inventor, your data is stored within your firewall and within your domain and on your servers or hard drive, for example. And that's a discussion that needs to happen at a high level with IT or people that are responsible for your data. Another big difference is that Fusion does not require a lot of horsepower or a large footprint on your computer. When it installs, like Kevin mentioned earlier, it's very small install. And when you launch it using the icon that it creates, it fires up, connects to the internet, and then you're working via the internet. So if your internet goes down, you can't use Fusion. Fusion files can be stored locally, right? So if you build something within Fusion and you're within the cloud, I think Kevin showed this earlier, you can save that down for safekeeping if you'd like. But to me, the biggest difference is that one is cloud-based and one is not. One requires a lot of horsepower and a big footprint, but is secure within your firewall, and the other is pretty much cloud-based.
That's a perfect description. Very good. Here we still have a few people on.
Yeah, we're at the top. I hope I answered most of the questions. And like Kevin mentioned too, we are running now Fusion training classes, specifically focusing on the design side of it. We have also started running classes for the Fusion manufacturing side of things, as far as toolpath for milling machines and turning centers and punches. Those classes are not our standard, what we call our standard classes. We prefer on the manufacturing side to engage one-on-one with customers, because one customer might want to learn more about milling, while the other customer might want to learn more about turning. So throwing everybody from different environments into one class doesn't work well. So for manufacturing, we prefer to do those as custom classes, one-on-one.
Good.
I'll shut up now.
No, that's perfect. That's absolutely perfect. I've got a slide up here that kind of goes through our Fusion new user class, and we do get into the simulation just a little bit in that class. I don't know that that's listed on here, but just kind of an introduction to some of the simulation tools. We don't go terribly deep in that, and I think, Tad, that probably would be one of those customer specific questions or class setups as well, if we wanted to get deeper into all of the advantages of simulation. And then just our last slide here, showing some of the document management solutions and capabilities that Hagerman has had for many years. We do this very often, and our guys do it very well. And then we've also developed some additional tools that work inside and around the Autodesk Vault product in conjunction with, and they make life a whole lot easier when it comes to just some of the different settings that are involved there. So I think we've exhausted our time. I think this is the first time I've actually ran over on a webinar.
Yeah, there's a lot to it.
There really is. There really is. Feel free, folks, to reach out to your sales folks and ask additional questions. We'll be happy to help you with this, and get you answers to those questions. Well, anything else? Thank you, Rick.
Okay, thank you,
good.
guys.
Thanks, Kep.
All right, have a great day, everyone.